Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Chapter 2. Black Dog Appears and Disappears. It was not very long after this that there occurred the first of the mysterious events that rid us at last of the captain, though not, as you see, of his affairs. It was a bitter cold winter, with long, hard frosts and heavy gales. And it was plain from the first that my poor father was little likely to see the spring. He sank daily, and my mother and I had all the inn upon our hands, and were kept busy enough, without paying much regard to our unpleasant guest. It was one January morning, very early, a pinching, frosty morning, the cove all grey with hoar-frost, and ripple lapping softly on the stones. The sun was still low and only touching the hilltops, and shining far to the seaward. The captain had arisen earlier than usual, and set out down to the beach, his cutlass swinging under the broad skirt of our blue coat, his brass telescope under his arm, his hat tilted back upon his head. I remember his breath hanging like smoke in his wake, as he strode off. And the last sound I heard of him, as we turned the big rock, was a loud snort of indignation, as though his mind was still running upon Dr. Livesey. Well, mother was upstairs with father, and I was laying at the breakfast table against the captain's return, when the parlour door opened. A man stepped in on whom I had never set my eyes on before. He was a pale, tallowy creature, and wanting 2 fingers of the left hand, and, though he wore a cutlass, he did not look much like a fighter. I had always had my eyes open for seafaring men, with 1 leg or 2, and I remembered this one puzzled me. He was not sailory, but yet he had a spark of the sea about him too. I asked him what was for his service, and he said he would take rum. But as I was going out of the room to fetch it, he sat down on the table and motioned me to draw near. I paused where I was with my napkin in my hand. "Come here, sonny," he said. "Come nearer." I took a step nearer. "Is this table from my mate Bill?" he asked with a kind of leer. I told him I did not know his mate Bill, and that this was for a person who stayed in our house, whom he called Captain. "Well," he said, "my mate Bill would be called the captain, like as not. He has a cut on one cheek, and mighty pleasant way with him, particularly in drink. He has my mate Bill. We'll put it, for argument like, that your captain has a cut on one cheek, and we'll put it, if you like, that cheek's the right one." "Ah, well, I told you. Now, is my mate Bill in this here house?" I told him he was out walking. "Which way, sonny? Which way is he gone?" And when I pointed out the rock, and told him the captain was likely to return, and how soon, and answered a few other questions. "Ah," he said, "this'll be as good as drink to my mate Bill." The expression on his face as he said those words were not all pleasant, and I had my own reasons for thinking that the stranger was mistaken, even supposing he meant what he had said. It was no affair of mine, I thought, and besides, it was difficult to know what to do. The stranger kept hanging about just outside the inn door, peering round the corner like a cat, waiting for a mouse. Once I stepped out into the road, he immediately called me back, and, as I did not obey quickly enough for his fancy, the most horrible change came over his tallowy face, and he ordered me in, with an oath that made me jump. As soon as I was back again, he returned to his former manner, half fawning, half sneering, patted me on the shoulder, told me I was a good boy, and he had taken quite a fancy to me. "I have a son of my own," he said, "as like you as 2 blocks. He has all the pride of my art. But the great thing for boys is discipline, sonny, discipline. Now, if you had sailed along of Bill, you wouldn't have stood there to be spoke twice, not you. That was never Bill's way, nor was the way sich as sailed with him. And now here, sure enough, is my mate Bill, with a spyglass under his arm, bless his old art, to be sure. You and me'll just go back to the parlor, sonny, and get behind the door. We'll give Bill a little surprise, bless his heart, I say again. And so saying, the stranger backed along with me into the parlor, and put me behind him in a corner so that we were both hidden by the open door. I was very uneasy and alarmed, as you may fancy, that it rather added to my fears to observe that the stranger was certainly frightened himself. He cleared the hilt of his cutlass and loosened the blade in his sheath, and all the time we were waiting there, he kept swallowing as if he felt that we were used to call lump in the throat. At last in strode the captain, slammed the door behind him without looking to the right or left, and marched straight across to where his breakfast awaited him. "Bail," said the stranger, in a voice that I thought he had tried to make bold and big. The captain spun round on his heel and fronted us. All the brown had gone out of his face, and even his nose was blue. He had the look of a man who's seen a ghost, or an evil one, or something worse, if anything can be, and, upon my word, I felt sorry to see him, all in a moment, turned so old and sick. Come, Bill, you know me. I'm an old shipmate, Bill. Surely, said the stranger. The captain made a sort of gasp. Black Dog, he said. And who else? Returned the other, getting more out of his ease. Black Dog as was ever coming to see his old shipmate Billy at the Admiral Benbow Inn. Ah, Bill, we have seen sight of times, us two. I'd lost 'em 2 talents, holding up his mutilated hand. Now, look here, said Captain. You've run me down. Here I am. Well then, speak up. What is it? That's you, Bill, returned Black Dog. You're in that right of it, Billy. I've a glass of run for this dear child here, and I've took such a liking to. And we'll sit down, if you please, and talk square like old shipmates. When I returned with the rum, they were already seated on either side of the captain's breakfast table. Black Dog sat next to the door, and sitting sideways so as to have one eye on his old shipmate, and one, as I thought, on his retreat. He bade me go and leave the door wide open. None of your keyholes for me, sonny, he said, and I left them together, and retired into the bar. For a long time, though I certainly did my best to listen, I could hear nothing but a low gabbling, but at last the voices began to grow higher, and I could pick up a word or two, mostly oaths from the captain. No, 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 and an end of it, cried one, and again, if it comes to the swing, swing all, I say. And then all of a sudden there was a tremendous explosion of oaths and other noise. The chair and the table went over in a lump, and a clash of steel followed, then a cry of pain, and next instant I saw Black Dog in full flight, and the captain hotly pursuing, with boats drawn with cutlasses. In foremost streaming blood from the left shoulder, just at the door, the captain aimed at the fugitive one last tremendous cut, which would certainly have split him to the chin if it had not been intercepted by our big signboard of Admiral Benbow. You may see the notch on the lower side of the frame to this day. That blow was the last of the battle. Once up upon the road, Black Dog, in spite of his wound, showed a wonderful clean pair of heels, and disappeared over the edge of the hill in half a minute. The captain, for his part, stood staring at the signboard like a bewildered man. Then he passed his hands over his eyes several times, then at last turned back into the house. Jim, he said, rum, and as he spoke, reeled a little and caught himself with one hand against the wall. Are you hurt? Cried I. Rum, he repeated. I must get away from here. Rum, rum. I ran to fetch it, but I was quite unsteadily by all that had fallen out. I broke one glass and followed the tap, while the other I was getting on my way. I heard a loud fall in the parlor, and running in, beheld the captain lying full length on the floor. At the same instant my mother, alarmed by the cries and fighting, came down on the stairs to help me. Between us we raised his head. He was breathing very loud and hard, but his eyes were closed, and his face a horrible colour. Dear, dearie me, cried my mother, what a disgrace upon the house! And your poor father is sick. In the meantime, we had no idea what to do to help this captain, and any other thought that he had got his death hurt in the scuffle with the stranger. I got the rum, to be sure. We tried to put it down his throat, but his teeth were tightly shut, his jaws as strong as iron. It was a happy relief for us when the door opened and Dr. Livesey came in on visit of my father. "Oh, doctor," we cried, "what shall we do? Where is he wounded?" "Wounded? A fiddlestick's end," said the doctor. "No more wounded than you or I. The man has a stroke, as I warned him. Now, Mrs. Hawkins, just you run upstairs to your husband and tell him, if possible, nothing about it. For my part, I must do my best to save this fellow's terribly worthless life, and Jim here will get me a basin." And when I got back with the basin, the doctor had already ripped up the captain's sleeve, exposed his great sinewy arm. It was tattooed in several places. "Here's luck!" A fair wind, and Billy Bones, his fancy, were very neatly and clear executed on his forearm, and up the near shoulder was a sketch of the gallows and a man hanging from it, done, as I thought, with great spirit. "Prophetic," said the doctor, touching his picture with his finger. "And now, Master Billy Bones, if it's your name, we'll have a look of the colour of your blood, Jim," he said. "Are you afraid of blood?" "No, sir," I said. "Well then," said he, "you hold the basin," and with that he took his lancet and opened the vein. A great deal of blood was taken before the captain opened his eyes and looked mistily about him. First he recognized the doctor with an unmistakable frown. Then he glanced upon me. He looked relieved, but suddenly his colour changed, and he tried to raise himself, crying, "Where's Black Dog?" "There is no black dog here," said the doctor, "except what you have on your own back. You've been drinking rum. You have a stroke, precisely as I told you, and I have just, very much against my own will, dragged you head foremost out of the grave. Now, Mr. Bones—" "That's not my name," he interrupted. "Much I care," returned the doctor. "It is the name of a buccaneer of my acquaintance, and I call you by it for the sake of shortness. And what I have to say to you is this: one glass of rum won't kill you, but if you take another, and take another and another, and I'll stake my wig if you don't break off short, you'll die. You understand that? Die, and go to your own place, like the men in the Bible. Come now, and make an effort. I'll help you to your bed for once." Between us, with much trouble, we managed to hoist him upstairs and laid him on his bed, where his head fell back on the pillow as if he were almost fainting. "Now, mind you," said the doctor, "I clear my conscience, and the name of rum for you is death." And with that he went off to see my father, taking me with him by the arm. "This is nothing," he said, as soon as he closed the door. "I have drawn blood enough to keep him quiet for a while. He should lie for a week where he is. That's the best thing for him and you. But another stroke will settle him."